Hello and welcome back to Forza Horizon 4 with a relatively new car, the Ferrari Portofino? I'm gonna call it the Portfolio because it's easier to say. Yes, the new Ferrari is here and it looks very, very nice. And it's a replacement for the California. And, well, this is more Ferrari's base model Super GT car. Well, it's not a supercar, it's a Grand Touring car. But there are an awful lot of these Grand Touring cars out there, and is Ferrari really the best option for you? Well, to see how good it is, I was gonna put it to the test against a bunch of new cars ranging from Aston Martin to Porsche to TVR to Mclaren, as well as a few interesting ones, like the 911 400R from Gunter Works, or 400S, whatever it is, from Gunter Works. Or if you want to go a little more track-focused, the BMW M3 GTS. They're all within 50 PI points of each other. All of them are sort of touring cars in one way or another, except for maybe the BMW. And all of them are very, very fast. Which one of them would be the best in a series of tests that would help determine the ultimate Super GT car? These cars have the word super in their name, so clearly the only first logical step is a top speed run. And obviously this is going to favor some cars more than others, and the straggler was, well, the Morgan Aero. I chose the Morgan Aero because it's a bit interesting. It's more of a GT car than a Super GT car. I threw it in here anyway, relatively similar PI. It has less than 400 horsepower, and it's made of wood. And it hit a top speed of 189 miles an hour, which I will say sounds terrifying in a Morgan Aero. Have you seen them? They're not exactly aerodynamic. I think one report once said they felt like they lifted off after about 180, so that would be quite scary, I would imagine. But it is not last. That honor goes to the Gunter Works 911. 1 mile an hour slower. Now, the same cannot be said for many of the other cars. Most of these cars are cracking the 200 mile an hour mark. In fact, all but the M3, the 911, and the Morgan hit excess of 200 miles an hour. And the king of these, well, we're not really surprised by it, though. The Aston Martin DBS Superleggera, probably one of the best looking cars here, for sure. And it's by far and away the most powerful. I think it's like 715 horsepower from a twin turbocharged V12. It's stupid fast. It hit 217 miles an hour. That's Porsche 918 territory. It's ridiculously fast. Now, the DBS is great and all, very fast, a winner by far, but if you want sheer excitement, the Lexus LFA does have it beat because, well, V10 noise is no other way to put it. Doesn't it sound fantastic? That Yamaha V10 is just about one of the best engines ever made. Probably ever, and you cannot change my mind on that. But as far as the table is concerned, the DBS wins, but not by a huge amount. The Portfolio gets second place. The new Ferrari, very fast in a straight line, 215, followed up by the Gallardo Superleggera. The Italians doing quite well in this one. Also the Nissan GTR, often overlooked these days because it's a little bit bloated now. But it can still get some speed up, 209, which is 1 mile an hour slower than the Americans, a respectable 210 from the Viper. Yeah, there were some interesting ones. I'm a little surprised that the 911 Gunter Works was slower than the Morgan, but you know, sometimes you gotta have upsets, and that is quite the upset, I will be honest. It's a bit of a unique one. You see, I could do a lap time at Legoland, but that would be a little bit against the spirit of a GT car, would it not? So instead, I built a course from scratch, from a little house to the castle in Edinburgh. And it was a little touring route through streets, winding roads, flat-out sections, hairpins, right-hand corners. I mean, it had all of the key aspects of a balanced circuit. And I was going to test these Super GT cars against the clock. How fast could they get to Edinburgh Castle on roads? Because that's where they're going to be most of the time. So it was a bit different than a traditional lap time test. Now, I love the TVR Griffith because it's American power tuned by Cosworth, so it has a Mustang Coyote V8. 480 horsepower, I think it's less than 2,900 pounds, and it's more sensible than other TVRs, looking at you, Sagras, but it's still a TVR, still got that bit of quirkiness. It has a very, very long hood, so the front axle can be ahead of the engine, and it also has exhausts coming out of the front benders, because TVR loves to do strange things with their exhausts, and that's why I love them so much. But it's also a very good handling car that sounds great and it has a pretty high top speed. So it's a really good all-arounder, and it did very well. I was very impressed with the small British sports car here. The surprise, I would say, the most surprise anyway, I would say, is the DBS Superleggera, because it's not exactly a light car. It's not the heaviest car here, but it's also not exactly the lightest, over 3,200 pounds, despite the name Superleggera. It got second place. That's pretty darn good, helped out by that massive power, but massive power can come with massive wheel spin, especially in a rear-wheel drive car, and it handled it a lot better than I was expecting. Now, ironically, if we're talking about the overall times, the vehicles named Superleggera finished 1-2 with the Gallardo Superleggera coming home in first. Very respectable time. Only the Gallardo and the DBS were actually in the 223s. Everything else is 224 and below. With the Mclaren, the only mid-engine car here, in fact, besides the Lamborghini. 570S finishing respectable third, followed by the TVR. Very, very respectable for the, I think it's still a prototype. They haven't actually sold it yet, because TVR just can't get their feet off the ground. However, the biggest disappointment by far is the Mercedes, the AMG. I had a lot of high hopes of the GTS. I know it's not the GTR, but that's more of a track-based car, not really in the spirit of the touring car, if I'm honest, with its fancy aerodynamics and its bright green paint and its Nürburgring lap record objective. So I went with the GTS, and it was terrible. It was slower than the Morgan. In fact, two cars were slower than the Morgan. The Morgan, made of wood, with less than 400 horsepower, beat an AMG and an Aston Martin Zagato. I can understand the Zagato, because it's a very luxurious car. I can't understand the AMG, because it's AMG. That is very embarrassing. I'm a little ashamed for them, I will be honest. I was expecting better from them. Now, the last two events have been relatively speed-orientated, the obviously the top speed, and then the relatively long straightaways and acceleration zones of our touring car test. But this one has nothing to do with speed. It has acceleration and handling, and that is it. It is a speed zone to a very twisty mountain road, and this is where you would expect the all-wheel drive cars to do very, very well. And you would be right. The Nissan GTR making up for its lackluster performance in the touring car time with a respectable third place. All-wheel drive, pretty grippy tires, very good four-wheel drive system. Pretty easy to see why that would be a very good two-way average. You go up one way, record your average speed, then you go down the other way, back where you came, record your average speed, add them up, divide by 2, that is your final result. Now, I really wanted some cars to do better than others. Obviously, everything has to be impartial here, but there are some ones I really hope would do better. The LFA did not fare well here. It's a bit heavy, it's rear-wheel drive, and does not have a lot of torque, which means it does not have a lot of acceleration, and as a result, it is in last by a bit. You know what's not in last, though? Probably the biggest surprise of the entire day for me The TVR Griffith scored a first place rear-wheel drive, 480 horsepower, and it won against the Nissan GTR. The Ferrari Portofino, the Gallardo. And you know what? The Gallardo didn't even do that well. It only scored in 8th place. I mean, the Gallardo's all-wheel drive with carbon fiber and a 570 horsepower V10 mounted in the middle. It should be perfect for this, and it just wasn't fast. I don't know if I didn't get the max out of the car, or if it just wasn't as fast as I was hoping it to be. But the Gallardo was a bit of a letdown, I will be honest. And the 911 Gunther Works, after being humiliated in the GT time and the top speed, scoring near the bottom or at the bottom in both of them, scored a 2nd place. Considering it's made almost entirely out of carbon fiber and has an engine mounted on the rear axle, and is, you know, at the end of the day, a Porsche 911 in hearts, it did rather well. In fact, it did better than the current 911, the 992 generation. So, yeah, the Gunther Works did not let itself down. Indeed. So, final tallies. TVR scoring a surprise first place by quite a margin. I mean, it was over half a mile an hour faster than 2nd place with the Gunther Works. That's a massive difference on this speed trap. I mean, it was faster than the Nissan, it was faster than the Mclaren. The DBS Superleggera did good for what it is, considering how rear-wheel drive it is, and, you know, massive power, wheel spin. That did very good, earning a 6th place ahead of the AMG, slightly redeeming itself, entering mid-pack. The Viper not doing so well here. It was good on the straight line speed bits. Not so good here, being American, unfortunately, because we just can't shake those stereotypes, unfortunately for him. The Portfolio, the Ferrari Portfolio, did not do so well, scoring a 9th place, just behind the very depressingly slow Gallardo Superleggera in 8th. I don't know what it was, but it was just not fast. It was a very weird occurrence, but it was not fast. And we move on to the final test, a good old-fashioned 0 to 100 and then back to 0 test. Now, this is a test of acceleration, power, and brakes. So, the Morgan finished last, as it has no power and decent brakes, but it also has no acceleration. It has no weight, but it's not enough. And it just wasn't that good. Same thing with the 911 Gunther Works. We saw it struggle with the top speed, and being naturally aspirated, it does sometimes bog down on the lawn, so it's very difficult to get that car off the line, and it did struggle getting up to 100. It was very good once it stopped, but getting there was a bit of an issue. The same, though, cannot be said for the all-wheel drive cars. Yes, they were making a comeback with a vengeance. Again, as you can expect, the Nissan GTR, and especially the Gallardo being fantastically suited for this. V10 torque, all-wheel drive, carbon fiber weight. You know, it's the perfect vehicle for this, if I'm honest, and it scored a very, very respectable 2nd place. Now, I say 2nd place because 1st place was actually a rear-wheel drive car. The Mclaren 570S scored his first and only win here today with a blistering 0 to 100 to 0 time of under 9.5 seconds. The only other car to do that was the Gallardo at 9.39 and the Nissan at 9.45. Everything else was slower. Now, I will say, the real showstopper for me was the DBS. The DBS, this car continually surprised me all day, and it continued. Because rear-wheel drive, massive turbocharged power, I was expecting some lag and then massive wheel spin, and it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. It had a blistering at 4th overall in this test, which is very good. Yes, it has a lot of power, but it has a lot of weight on it. It's rear-wheel drive, so it shouldn't be very good for this, and yet it was. It was indeed, as was the Portfolio. The Ferrari scoring just behind the Aston in 5th. Again, very impressive considering it has less than 600 horsepower and is a convertible, which means it has to have weight added to it for structural rigidity. And it did awfully well for what it was. I was very impressed by the Portfolio. For the overall points table, and this was by far and away the closest challenge I have ever had. I used the V8 Supercar scoring system. You can Google it. It's very complicated. And the winner, by 2 whole points, yeah, that's right, 2, is the Aston Martin DBS Superleggera. Yes, beating out the Lamborghini Gallardo Superleggera by just 2 points. That is incredibly close, especially considering what meant it win. The DBS was very consistent, never scored lower than 6th. The Gallardo was very consistent, getting on the podium every single time except for the speed zone, where it finished in 8th, and ultimately that cost it the win. If it had a better run through there, it would have won, but instead it loses out by just 2 points. The McLaren 570S, you don't really hear too much about that one in this one, because it was just kind of there. It was good, very good. In fact, it scored a 3rd place overall in the series at 247 for the point total, but it was just kind of there. Never really excelled at anything other than the 0 to 100 to 0. 4th place was the Nissan GTR. I scoff at the GTR for a very long time because they haven't updated it since 2009, really. But it did very well, 4th place respectively, beating out the TVR Griffith, again by just 9 points. It also beat out the Ferrari by 15 points almost. That's a huge gap between those two. And the Ferrari is brand spanking new, designed in-house. And while it is the best of the convertibles, it's still in 6th place. So, if you want an open-top Grand Tourer, the Ferrari is your best choice. Because, well, if you look at it, it's better than the 911 992, it's better than the Viper GTS in 8th. It is better than the Lexus LFA, I begrudgingly admit. Of course, to be fair, the LFA is a decade old now, but it is still better than it. And way down the list, the Morgan, it was a bit over its head. I threw it in there just as a bit of a what if. Also, the M3 GTS, again, threw that in just for some interesting comparison's sake, and the Morgan held its own. You know, it beat the AMG, it came 12th, it only got last once. The Mercedes, it did get a 9th place in the lap time testing, I guess, well, lap to touring car times, but there wasn't really anything noteworthy with it, I'll be honest. It didn't hit 200 miles an hour in the top speed, it didn't get higher than 10th in the speed zone, and it was rubbish in the 0 to 100 to 0, but so it scored a 13th place. So, there you go. If you want the ultimate convertible Grand Touring car, the Ferrari Portfolio is the vehicle of choice. But if you want just an outright Super GT car, well, and I'm happy to say this, I love the car, the Aston Martin DBS Superleggera is the perfect touring car for the enthusiastic motorist. But that will be it, though, for this episode of Forza Horizon 4, and I'll be back with more